I know there's much sugar more than you because you didn't go to church this morning. So get your Bibles and let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, all right? Now, the passage this morning I'm going to read, the subject is the substance of faith. The substance of faith. Let me just say, the book of Hebrews was written for a very important purpose, and written to a group of unbelieving Jews who had been, well, let me just go back a little bit and just tell you, you remember that Paul was a persecutor of the church. You remember that Paul was very rigorous, that he didn't spare you, he would drag you to jail, you would be arrested, or you would be killed in some cases. Now, if you look at Acts 8 verse 1, it says, those who were scattered, except for the elders, a lot of people were scattered. They accepted Christ, but then there is the persecution from Paul had continued. Even Paul himself came under his own persecution, which was started back before he was saved. But the church was under intense persecution, and then we have a split in the Jewish tribe, race. What they had was some people believed God, and they became believers. And some people did not. And they were still under heavy persecution. Of course, the whole church was under persecution at the time, but people started to scatter. And they were so scattered that whoever wrote Hebrews, and by the way, Hebrews was written somewhere between 33 and 70. The church was destroyed in AD 70. Not the church, the temple was destroyed in AD 70. AD 33 would be about the time when Christ returned to heaven. So the church was written, so the book of Hebrews was written around about between 33 and 70, somewhere in there. I remember that when I said destroyed, I meant the temple of Jerusalem was completely destroyed, but the book was written before the destruction. What was happening then in Jerusalem? You had animal sacrifices at the temple. Jews were still visiting the temple in droves, and remember I talked about the split. Those who did not continuously go to the temple were kind of drawn between, do I need to become a Christian or do I need to go back to the temple? And this was their dilemma. They were saying, wait a minute, I have neighbors who are now Jewish believers and they are strongly going to the Christian church. How are they doing that? How are they not saved by the sacrifices and the blood that were being shed at the temple? And so this dilemma was strong between, some were saying, I'm going back to the temple. And some were saying, I would like to go on and just become a church member like my neighbor or whoever. And so the book was written to prove to the Jews a preposition that they had all carried with them from the Old Testament. They all learned from the Old Testament. Paul was now, whoever was writing the book was now trying to prove something. Let me show you the preposition that was being proven. Let's go to Hebrews 7 and look at verse 22. Hebrews 7, look at verse 22. That was, whatever verse 22 is saying, is going to be what the Hebrew writer was trying to prove. Let me look at verse 7. Verse 22 says, by so much was Jesus made a surer of a better testament. He was saying that Jesus Christ was a better testament. Next chapter, chapter 8, look at verse 6. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. He was saying that you have a lot of good promises in your Old Testament, but listen, Jesus Christ is better. And he was trying to prove that in chapters 1 to chapter 10, he was writing that Christ was a better He was better than Moses. He was better than the angels. He was better than your First Testament. He was better than everything that you hold dear. Jesus Christ came out. Look at verse 7. In same 8, chapter 8, verse 7. If that first covenant had been faultless, then should have no place have been sought for a second. Had it been better? Look at verse 8. For finding fault with them, he said, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. And this covenant was what the writer of Hebrew was trying to show them, how much better it is than your old covenant. Show you something else. Look at chapter, hold on a minute. I'll find my place in a second here, and then I'm going to show you another verse of scripture. Take a look at chapter 10 and verse 9. Flip over to chapter 10 and verse 9. Chapter 10 and verse 9 says, then said he, lo, I come to do thy will, O God. He hath taken away the first, that he may establish the second. He was trying to prove that Jesus Christ was better than what you're used to in your going and killing animals and all of that. This was his proof. He wasn't saying that Christianity was better than Judaism. That was not his talk. He was writing to unsaved Jews to show them that, listen, you're standing at the door, you're looking inside the New Testament, you're seeing church, you're seeing Christ being worshipped, you heard that Christ was crucified, you heard a lot of stuff, but you have not come into the faith. You're kind of standing at the door, and in fact, you're even thinking of going back to the sacrificial system. And the writer is trying to show all that was better with the new covenant than the old covenant. Do you see that? And so he made a great argument. Now, I have a question. How were people saved in the Old Testament? They were saved by faith. However, the Jews were still holding on to their method. They still believed that works, animal sacrifice, and all of that was better than, because you can do something, you can work. It can't be just believing. Something's wrong with that, they were thinking in their mind. We have to do something. And the word salvation had various, I said that last week, that the word salvation had various meaning over the New Testament. For instance, in Exodus 40, you're not going to have to turn there, but in Exodus 40 and verse 30, it was salvation. God was saving Israel out of Egypt. And salvation was physical deliverance from a specific danger. They were serving, they were being killed, they were roughly treated in there, and God rescued them. So in that sense, that word salvation then, in that sense, was a rescue from physical danger. In Deuteronomy 22, we have a forensic or legal rescue, which is like a girl who's walking in the forest or in the field, and she was raped by a man. And she called out for help, and no one came. What does that mean? It meant that every issue of salvation, you had somebody in a helpless position, needed help, and could not get that kind of help unless somebody had to jump in and save them. It says legal rescue. Implicit in all of its salvation are the perception of need and inability. They had a need, they need to be rescued, and they couldn't rescue themselves. And that is why Job said, in Job 2 verse 9, it says, salvation is of the Lord. Where was he? He was helpless, he was in the belly of a fish, he was praying, and he come to the conclusion that I have to pray to God because salvation is of the Lord. There was nowhere else to get salvation from. And so The Hebrew writer was going a little bit further. He was saying, listen, you have another thing that you are missing, and that was faith. He showed them that Abraham was saved by faith. It says in chapter 15 and verse 6, it says, and Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Amen. And so now in chapter 11, he turned his attention. Let's look at verse 1. We're going to go chapter 1, verse 1, 2, and 3. Only 3 verses today, but we want to go through verses 1, 2, and 3. Now let me look at my saying. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the substance. Look at the word substance. The word substance there is the Greek word for substance is hypostasis. Hypostasis. It's 2 words made up that one word, hypostasis. It's to stand under. To stand, and the next word, the next part of the word is under, to stand under, or something that support the foundation. Now think about the foundation, because if you're going to build a house, and you walk out into the field, and you're going to build a house, you get your tractor, and they start digging down, and when they get to stone or rock, they said, that's your foundation, we're going to build now. Think about that. It's a rock foundation. But listen, substance is the thing that supports the foundation. You see that? You believe in God, and He says, I am the rock which you put your faith in. That is what supports the foundation of what you rest your faith in. See that? Your faith is the foundation that is underneath, that is the substance that is under the foundation. It has to be stronger than the foundation. Amen. It has to support the foundation. So to stand under, faith is the substance that stand under the foundation that your faith is resting. It is tremendously important that you see that. Because when you see that, then you recognize then faith apprehends as real what is not revealed by the senses. Let me go back over that. Faith apprehends what is not revealed by the senses. Amen. And therefore faith is real seeing. You want to see? Your faith is stronger than the evidence of your eyes. You can't see heaven right now. You can't see God. You can't see Jesus Christ. When Thomas complained that, I'm not going to believe unless I see, Jesus came in and said, all right, take a look. Here's my hand, here's my side. And then he said this, blessed are those who believe without seeing. They don't see me, they have not had a chance to touch me, but they believe. Did you know he was describing us? Did you know he was looking down the corridors at a time and know that we were going to have to put our faith in him without seeing him? Amen. But we're going to have to believe. And we drop everything at home and come to church this morning and we're worshiping a God you can't see. We believe what he writes in the scriptures, and we believe that one day the trumpet is going to blow and he's going to take us out of here. We believe that. We believe that to the point where some people go and give their life for it. Yeah. Such a statement is so real. You can't see it, but yet you will die for it. It has to be remarkable. So then, faith is the substance of the things you hope for. And it is also the evidence. Now imagine if you go to court and you're going to be convicted, they search and search until they find evidence that can put you away. The evidence has to be so strong that it cannot be refuted. Faith then is what you use as your evidence that God is real. Our evidence, we have evidence that what God promised He can give and He will give. We have evidence. We are sure. We are so sure it's more than our very life. That's why we can say, I will swap this life for the future life. Did we see anything? No. We believe it. That is stronger than your physical eyesight. Wow. Remarkable. You read Peter chapter 1. You will see how important faith is. Peter says, the revelations I read in Scripture is stronger than the very eyesight that I saw when I stood up and looked at Him. I saw Him in His glory, when I saw Him revealing Himself to me. He said, I'm not telling you about something that we're guessing about. We're telling you something that is so real. It's realer than what I saw. Okay, verse 2. Oh, by the way, let me tell you how verse 1 is read in the Greek. Now, faith is the title deed of things hoped for, the conviction of things which are not being seen. You have a conviction, and that conviction is placed inside of you by your faith, which is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things not seen. It's so powerful that he's saying if you could see it, you would need faith. And you're seeing it, could be, your brain could be fooling you. But faith is so solid that that can't miss. Praise the righteous name of God. Yes. It says, by that faith, let me just go a little bit further here about the substance, because about not substance, about the title deed. Another way to look at title deed is, well, let me see substance a little bit more first, because when we go to substance again, we did look at it in one sense, we're going to look at it in another sense. If you go to the archives downtown, and you had a piece of property, and you start to dig up and say, well, here's my name, I'd like to see my title deed. Here's what they do. They go into the archives, they dig up the first receipt that you receive when you pay your down payment. They look at the application when you apply for the loan. They look at all the paperwork that support that application, and that application is pointing to another drawer which having your title deed. They take out the title deed and say this land belongs to him. Oh, you know that. We have evidence that this is the substance of his land. We are so sure that all we have to do is establish an office, and they believe that all the people out there are going to come every month with their money to pay their tax and to pay at the bank. And when they finish that, they give them the title. They don't have no way of checking your pay, but they look at the title deed and look at the receipt and they say, he paid, that's his land. So the faith is your title deed that you have. When you stand up, when Peter opened the door and said, oh, is that Raymond here? They look on the record and say, okay, come on in. What let you in? Your title deed that you have. What is it? Your faith. Praise His righteous name. I'm telling you. All right. So faith is the whole body of document being on the ownership of a person's, it's your evidence of your ownership that you have. All right, so that takes care then. Then we're going to look at verse 2. That was verse 1. Let's look at verse 2. Verse 2 says, for by it, what? By it what? Faith, the elders obtain a good report. I'm going to look at that. For by it. The word for by it there, by it, let me see if I can, we're in this building. We're in the sphere of this building. That's where we are. If you were to drive down the street and you look, you would see our cars outside, but you don't see us. So to see us, you have to come into this sphere of this building, and then you'd see us. We're inside the building, right? All right. Now, but it says, by faith the elders obtained a good report. They were in this sphere of faith. And so God, the word good report there is a weakness. Who is your weakness? Is a report of a weakness. God is the weakness. God look on your faith, inspect your faith, and said, by the faith that they have, I promise you I am going to approve them because I witnessed their faith. By it the elders bear witness that they obtain a good report from God. God says, I look on their faith, and I said, I'm going to stand up in court and testify. Who is the judge? Him. Who is he witnessing to? Himself. And he swear by himself that what I saw, when I look at the faith record, and I swear by myself that these people are going to come on in because my witness bear them testimony. They have evidence that they believe enough for me to let them in. Let me show you. I'm going to show you something that is going to. I want to show you something here. Let's take a look on verse 9 and 10, 11 to 16, 13 to 16. Let's take a look on verse 9. I'm going to show you something in verse 9. It said, by faith, that is Abraham. Abraham, because verse 8 introduced him by faith, right? Remember that? Yes. It said by faith, Abraham. So that same he is mentioned in verse 9. He sojourned or traveled in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacle. Look who he's with. He's with Isaac and Jacob, and the heirs with him of the same promise. Let's go down, verse 10. For he looked for a city which had foundation, whose builder and maker is God. Let me explain something to you. God called this man out of his pagan territory and said, I need for you to come with me. I'm going to show you where you're going. Now, you don't know where he's going. He just leave and he started to travel behind God. But as he go, he become more convinced and more relying upon the evidence that he is seeing. How is he seeing? How can he see heaven? Listen to this. For he looked for a city, right, which had foundation, whose builder and maker is God. Listen to this. Through faith, let me drop down to verse 13. The people that Abraham was with, that Isaac and Jacob, all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off. Question, how did he see them? By faith. Remember we said that faith seeing was better than the eye seeing? All right, listen to this. And were persuaded of them. Not only was he convinced, but he embraced them, and then he confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Not only did he see them with his eyes, through his mind's eye, but were persuaded of them and embraced them and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims in the land. Now let me show you something. Verse 15 said this. If they had been mindful of that country from which they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly country, wherefore God is not ashamed to be... Let me explain what that verse is saying. It said, listen to me. I call these people and they are coming behind me. They are following me. And had they wanted to go back, there's a lot of opportunity. They could have just turned around and go back. But they were so convinced of where they were going that it was there, better than the country they're coming from. They were so convinced that where they're going is better than where they're coming from, that God said if they wanted to turn back, they have a lot of opportunity. But they were convinced, they embraced, and they confessed. And when he heard that, the only thing he could do is say, oh, you know what? I'm going to talk in human terms now, because I know that God didn't say that and do that. But it's just like us. So you get the phone ring and the person said, listen, I'm on my way. Where are you from? I'm coming down from New York. What time is it? 1 o'clock in the morning. But we haven't eaten because every restaurant is closed and I'm so hungry. I don't think I can go to bed. And when we get to you, there will be nothing to eat. So you're going to have to prepare food for us. 1 o'clock in the morning. And so when you hang up the phone, you say to yourself, that person talking, they're going to die, they can't wait till tomorrow morning. Guess what? I'm going to have to do as late as it is. When God observed Abraham's faith, it was so overwhelming, I'm going to have to build this boy a city. Not that he didn't build it before, I'm just saying in human terms. The way that he was convinced and embraced the land and hold on to it and confess, I am his witness, there is no way I could let him sleep outside when he comes to heaven. I'm going to have to build him a city. You get me? That's what you're looking at. Verse 15 says, and truly, if they had been mindful, the word truly there when Jesus said, verily, verily, same thing. If they had been mindful of that country from which they came back, then there's a lot of opportunity for them to go back. They didn't go back. But they desire a better country that is heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, because he's the one who set the standard. He demanded that without faith it is impossible to believe me. And since the guys passed the test that I set for him, I'm going to have to prepare a message. See that? He is so convinced that's the substance, that's the substance of faith. It is such that it's more important than something you can touch, because that's your senses. Even if you could touch heaven, it is not as real as the one that your faith is telling you that is there. Wow. It is that powerful. In other words, if you believe God, you don't have to see nothing. You don't have to see it. It's not necessary to have faith anymore, to have eyesight anymore if you can believe God. If your salvation was rest on seeing, it would all become there. You didn't see nothing. 2,000 years ago, Christ died on the cross, and we look back and say, we read it and we say, I believe that. And we put our faith in that belief, and God said, based on that, come on. Without faith, it is impossible to believe me. And I want you to know that verse 1, I'll show you. Verse 1. It is the substance of things that we're hoping for, but he gives us evidence of the things that are not seen. Evidence is tangible. Evidence is something you can touch. Evidence is something that you know you can handle. It's like the title deed that you have in your hand. You can read the word, look at the date, all of that. Title deed. But faith is the substance of those things that we're hoping for. It is the evidence of things not seen. You don't have to see it to know it's there. Okay? We believe it. God is true and you cannot go back on his word. Look at this word, verse 3. Through faith we understand. Stop at understand. And what that is. Understand is more than the eyesight. That understanding there, faith is we understand. That the word, you see, let me see if I can see. The word is noeo, N-O-E-O, and it is to perceive with the reflective intelligence. To perceive with the reflective intelligence. Reflective. If I was talking to you and you're talking to me and you said to me, man, I rode an elephant this morning and I was so excited, and I would look at him and I would think in my mind, I didn't say it, but I could see that he's lying. Question, how do I see? What am I seeing? What am I using to see? Your mind. You assess what the person is saying and you come to the conclusion I don't believe you. When we look at the world created by God, we didn't have to see him make it. The writer said we understand. We can understand that this world was created by God. We understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God. Let me look at the word. So that word there where it says understand, it is a reflective understanding of the intelligence. God is He's setting the stage in such a way that if you were blind and dumb, He wouldn't stop you from going to heaven. If you couldn't speak, but you can understand when you read, your faith will be strong enough to take you to heaven if you can't even see. You can't see the world around you. You feel it. You reach out and touch it. It don't stop you from going to heaven because your belief is stronger than that. It's stronger than what you touch. Your faith is stronger than what you touch. And that is why it is reflective intelligence. When God said, you understand. When I tell you that God created the world and you understand that, it is reflective intelligence. It's the intelligence that go beyond the sight and the feeling and the touch and just the senses. It is the perception of the mind. And when the mind perceives, it is keener than what your eyes see, because that's an inbuilt ability to believe God. That's where the faith is coming from. Faith is coming from God, built inside of you. By the way, faith is a gift from God. Faith is a gift from God. And when He gives you, He's saying, I'm going to outstrip your senses. I'm going to override your senses. Because you remember when they eat the bread and the fish and they said, show us a sign. They still didn't believe in that He was the Messiah, even though they saw the food. They touched the food. They saw Him heal. And they still say to Him, show us a sign. They didn't believe. He said to them, some of them, you shall die in your sins. Because I can tell, not from what you're saying, if you were just demanding evidence, I wouldn't be upset if you were just demanding evidence. But I've given you evidence after evidence after evidence, but you turn off your brain. You're no longer thinking. You have now decided that the food that you're seeing is more important than what I'm telling you about. And so you're going to die in your sins. The word in chapter 3, where it says, words, understand is to perceive with the reflective intelligence, and it is the perception of the mind. Look at the next word, world, the created universe. Plus it is you see, the world that we see here is eon. It is describing the world that we see, the created universe, but it is more than that. It is more than that in the sense that it adds to the world that you can see, the created world, is God's time, the times that is spent through all of eternity, all the times that God used to do His business and His planning and to bring everything into being, is described by the word worlds. And the created universe is include all that exists under the conditions of time and space, together with those conditions which did not bind God and did not exist independently of Him, but are themselves the work of His Word. They are also the work of His Word. The Word of God came. By the way, when I use the word in the creation, we're not talking about Jesus Christ the Son. We're talking about not that word. We're talking about the Rhema, spoken word when God speak and it came into being. God used His word, which had creative ability. He only had to speak it and it happened. Comes into being. Remember now, John 1:1 tells us about the Son, which is the Logos, which is the Word of God, which is the person of God. That is not what we're dealing with here. We're talking about God looking at the empty space and said, let there be light. That rhema word that came out of his mouth was creative, and it created the and it says that the things that were created, we couldn't see them. The things that he used to make the world could not be seen because they were invisible. The things that he used to make the world was his creative power, his rhema power, his word of just speaking it. Articulate utterances of the visible world were framed out of materials which were subject to human observation. There would have been no need for faith if you could see the material that he used to make. If you could see the material God used to make the world, there would have been no need for faith. And so it is important that we understand God is very, very powerful. And he could use any method he chose. He could just think it into being. But he did not. He spoke it and it came into being. We're telling you this morning, God is holy, God is righteous, and our faith that we depend on for salvation is so real that when Abraham exercised that faith, God said, you know, this boy could have gone back to his country if he wanted to. He didn't go back to his country. He pressed forward. He was convinced. He embraced and confessed. And God said, wow, that put me on the spot to build this man of word, because he's coming, leaving his country, and he's heading toward a country that is not seen. And yet he believed it so strongly that it's there, put me on the spot. I'm going to have to create him. I can't let disappoint you, because I'm the one who said, without faith it is impossible to please me, and this boy is full of faith. Therefore, he's going to have to see what he's embracing, what he's confessing, and what he's convinced that he's there. Let me ask you a question. Suppose you were standing in front of God and he should say, why should I let you into my heaven? You see, you would have to go back to 2,000 years and say, because Christ died for me. But you're talking about something you didn't see. You're talking about evidence that you didn't receive from a spoken word from anybody else. You just have to say, I believe that he died. And that's why I believe that you should have been dead. And he would say, come on. Your faith is stronger than your sense. Amen? Amen. I'm done. Your faith is stronger than your sense. Amen.